even in 2017, when Breath of the Wild came out, we're talking about day one, one of the most popular consoles of all time, in its future sales, canon voiced Zelda game. Like, how much more prestigious can you get when it comes to like a notable role? And I was here in the back going, I really hope people on the internet don't hate my performance. I hope they don't use me as an example of why the CDI games should have been the only voice Zelda games that ever existed. Oh my God, I'm a fraud.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Story Building, where I got some new foam sound diffusing foam panels. Today's guest is voice actor, streamer, and someone whose surname sounds like the surname of a fictional detective. It is Sean Chiplock. Welcome to One Story Building. Sean Chiplock on the case.
That's right. You gotta open with the noir scene of like, as they say, I was a chip off the old block. Like, or maybe that was a chip off the old block, but same story, different town.
Clever, clever, right into it. And of
Right?
course, on that note, on that voice, I normally would ask what got you into voice acting, what got you into being a voiceover guy,
Mhm.
but I want to mix it up a little bit. I want
Okay. Well, yeah, let's change the tune. What got you into being a voiceover guy? Answer that for me.
I just like buying foam panels because the white walls are too glary on my glasses. It's like, well, I've got the sponge, I may as well do the voice.
Going for that Mad TV spy versus spy aesthetic. I love it. It's
Yeah.
great.
And you can play chess on the walls. All right, question one. Instead of asking you what got you into voice acting stuff, I want to
Uh-huh.
ask you what got you away from other kinds of acting mediums. Why aren't you a theater actor or a movie actor or any other kind of actor?
Theater acting was thanks to primary school because I learned pretty much immediately that it wasn't just about your acting ability, it was whether or not you looked the part. And let's be real, a lot of us are not as attractive as we'd like to be. I certainly don't feel as attractive as a lot of my colleagues. So, it only took a few times of seeing people who we would describe as traditionally attractive get the major roles because they fit the character best. Or I'm like, okay, well, that's not for me. I don't feel like changing how I look just so that I have a better shot at these opportunities. Um, it would be incorrect of me to say that I have no interest in doing stuff like on camera auditions. If my agent were to say, we'd like you to go out and audition for this, or if a client were to genuinely be like, we think you would be a really good fit for this, would you send a sample? I'm gonna take that shot. There's cases where I get audition opportunities that ask me to self-record or self-tape my performance. And while I haven't had any success with them yet, I still submit for them every time I'm given that chance. Um, I guess what I'm trying not to lean into what got me into voice acting, but the best answer I can give to what took me away from other mediums is really just that it hasn't been what I've ended up doing, you know? When I started my career, I was very much an anime person. I got into it because of anime. Anime was what I grew up on when I was staying up late at night. It was at one point the ultimatum of what I wanted to do with my life and my career was to voice in an anime at any point in time. The bar was very low. Um, and in the time that has passed since, a lot of my notable roles have come instead from video games, but that doesn't mean that I've been taken away from or I have moved away from anime. It's just the course that my career has taken, but the interest is still there. So, I know that that's a bit of a roundabout way of answering your question, but for me, it's not I'm not interested in this sort of thing, but rather I'm doing well over here in this sort of thing. But I am always open to the idea of trying out for these things if the right opportunity comes along.
Many people that I've talked to who do more voice acting than other kind of acting, so they might be a little bit biased, but still, I agree.
Right.
Voice acting could be considered, if not is objectively, the purest form of acting because you don't need to get like makeup or a costume to make your character more of your character. It all
Hmm.
has to come from you. It all has to come from your performance.
Well, we could say that theater acting is also a pure form of acting because, yes, you can take away the makeup, you can take away the costumes, but there's so many different factors that go to embodying a character. You know, your mental state has to match what they're going through. You have to truly believe the world that you're in and the character that you're playing. On camera, you know, there's a lot of additional factors. You've got the physicality, you've got facial tics. If you think about Heath Ledger's Joker in the Batman films from what was it? Not Nolan North. I'm trying to think of
Christopher Nolan.
yes, yes, I believe so. Where the physicality was just as important as the voice itself. The major shift that I would say happens with voiceover is that, you know, with voice acting, you don't have the bonus of that physicality or the facial expressions or the makeup or the costumes to help sell it for you. You have to provide all of that through the voice itself. So it's a different format of it, but it really does require you to be more in tune with your body because um I don't want to make any implications about on-camera actors using it as an example, but an on-camera actor may have a costume and the makeup, and they may, you know, have their body in a certain posture, and that kind of helps sell the image. A voice actor has to be aware of how every movement that they do with their body, every facial expression, their posture affects their voice, and how they can manipulate that in order to achieve the desired effect. One of the most common early examples that workshops will teach about this is that if you stand up straight and you puff your chest out as you're talking, there's this natural confidence that ends up coming out. For some people, it's just because of the pose that they take. For a lot of people, it's because that posture actually helps your lungs get air out in a certain way. Um, uh, a more advanced example is I think it's Hank Azaria. Is it Hank Azaria who voices Homer Simpson? Is that correct?
Dan Castellaneta. Hank Azaria
Oh,
is like Mo and Apu.
okay, okay.
Always Apu.
So Dan, he would always tilt his head in a certain way to compress his throat in order to get the voice that he does for Homer Simpson. So, I think it's really interesting that as voice actors, we have to have a mastery over what adjustment can I make that people are not going to see that helps the voice get the message across that I want people to hear.
I think it's D. Bradley Baker who does the voice for a lot of animal sounds and a bunch of other things.
Pretty much any creature voice
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
ever heard, there's like
yeah.
a above 50% chance that it's him.
When he talks about it, he talks about closing off like tubes and sinuses in his mouth, and I'm like, I don't even know how you would even go about figuring out that you could physically do that to make the sound of like a bear or a cricket.
Right.
Um, as I was looking through your history of work, some of the things that you've done have gone all the way back to like 2012. So, and I mean, we're of similar age, although I think I'm a bit younger than you, so I win. But you must have been like 20 back when you were doing those, actual roles. So when you were that young, how did it feel getting paid voiceover work so early on in your acting life, in your life?
Well, I tried to or I did my best to make sure it didn't immediately go to my head because I had always been of the mindset of just because you are paid for it does not automatically mean that you're a professional, you know? Uh for example, there's lots of favors that I ask for from my friends and I often will pay them for their time because they're saving me time by providing that service, but just because I paid them for it doesn't make them a professional at it, you know what I mean? Um so for me, because VO for me technically started all the way back in 2007, but you are correct in saying that I wasn't really booking paid roles that were in the public eye until after I moved out to California. Um, but when I was doing odds and end jobs, you know, during my time at college between 2008 and 2012 before I moved out, I was making money from those. There were a lot of projects that I was doing that were just like narrating news articles and stuff like that. You know, 20 bucks here, 35 bucks here, 50 bucks here. But for me, the money was just a means of saving up so that I could move out to California. So for me, when I was getting paid for these roles, it wasn't, "Oh my god, people are actually paying me for this, you know, I'm skilled enough that I'm making an income off of it." It was, "Okay, number 1, I'm glad that I didn't suck at this job so hard that they're not gonna hire me again. Number 2, this money is gonna help ensure that I can pay my rent so I can actually stay out here in California." And I don't think it was until Oh man, I'm trying to think of an example of if I had to try and pinpoint a specific year, got much less a month where I felt like I was a true professional. I wouldn't know, because like, even in 2017, when Breath of the Wild came out, we're talking about day one of the most popular consoles of all time, in its future sales, canon voiced Zelda game. Like, how much more prestigious can you get when it comes to like a notable role? And I was here in the back going, I really hope people on the internet don't hate my performance. I hope they don't use me as an example of why the CDI games should have been the only voice Zelda games that ever existed. Oh my God, I'm a fraud. Like the imposter syndrome was massive. So even then, I was like, yeah, I got paid for it, but did I deserve it? Did I earn it? Or is it just legal reasons that they had to pay me because they brought me on? Um, so I think it continues even today where I recognize that I am paid and paid pretty well for the stuff that I do. But if we use like conventions as an example, it is still so weird to me that I can go to a weekend convention and sit at a table and sell my autograph on character prints, and dozens, if not hundreds of people will pay money for that sort of thing. And it's weird to me because I think those folks they could use that money to pay rent, they could use it to pay utilities, they could use it to buy food, and so I try to make sure that they get the value that they see in coming up and participating. All this to say, uh, yes, I recognize that I'm a professional, yes, I recognize that I get paid for what I do, but I never really shake the feeling that I need to continuously prove that people are not wasting their money when they pay me for that sort of thing. And that's part of what inspires me to stay hungry, stay invested, and try and always do the best work that I can do.
Mm. You said in a previous interview that when you book voiceover jobs, it isn't just like getting a job and then when you're done, you're then let go from that job. It's like
Right.
literally applying for a new job in general, and then as
Hmm.
soon as you are done, you're literally unemployed. Was
Yep.
that a concept that you were aware of when you were starting out, or did you realize it as you were keeping on going?
I mean, I was aware of it even getting into the industry just because I had had peers that I looked up to and they had shared their own experiences. Stuff like unemployment, I understood but didn't actually act on until it was drilled into my head by my agency. Like right now, I am on unemployment. Most weeks, I don't get anything from unemployment because we have to, certify every couple of weeks and let them know, did we work? Did we not work? If we did work, how much did we make? But it is a coverage in that if there is a week or two where I just do not work on anything, that is where unemployment comes in and kicks in for it because it's true. I am never an employer for any of these companies. I am hired as an independent contractor to do a specific gig. And then as soon as that gig is done, there's no promise of anything with that client. There's been clients that I've done one thing for and never heard from them again, and that's not because we're on bad terms. It's just how it panned out. I feel like I lost your original question that you were saying. Yeah, repeat the second half of that question for me.
Oh, I was just commenting on your comment that when you, I mean, acting in general, when you book a role, you have that as your job, and then
Yes.
when you're done doing that, it's not like you can just easily transition into
Right.
a thing. You
And it was
start off
actually brought
completely.
up in a workshop that I took recently where they were like, yeah, you guys can send us your demos and your agents can provide us demos, but the demo is more of a reference point for your agent to have an idea of what range you can cover and what roles you might be a good fit for so they can send you audition sides. When we send you audition sides, we're not really interested in demos. We want to hear your interpretation of our project, of our character. So, and I can attest to that because Rivali was a massive role for me, but I can tell you right now, the number of times that anyone has sent me an audition side and said, "We want you to do exactly what you did for Rivali, but for this character," is zero. It's zero. My performance as Rivali only mattered in the context of Breath of the Wild, and that performance has not mattered in any other context since then. So every audition is a brand new application where I mean, there will be similarities. Like if you were applying for a job as a circus performer versus if you were applying as a job for a hype man who kind of builds up the stage by doing acrobatic acts, there's going to be some overlap in terms of physical skill required. Or whether it's, a circus performer versus Cirque du Soleil performer, there's a certain level of acrobatic skill that's required. So as we look at audition sides for different characters, we'll see elements that are like, oh, this character has this type of personality, or this is their archetype or their character story, whether it was rags to riches or that they've been betrayed by someone and they're seeking revenge or something like that. We'll find what's familiar and then play around with what makes them different in order to come up with a new concoction. But there's never a case where it's just like, oh, I'm doing this exactly the same way that I did this other character because it's the same exact story.
There was a casting call for an online animation series that came out recently, and it came with a Google Doc that described each character in the show, and it had links to unlisted YouTube videos where it had examples of other characters doing voices that were similar to those characters. And each
Hmm.
video had a certain amount of views, all were pretty much the same. And then there was one character, this wacky top hat wearing jester Tumblr sexy man kind of character, and that
Right.
character, that video had at least 3 times the views. And I was like,
Okay.
interesting. So with that in mind, do you think that there are kinds of characters that, especially people just starting out with voice acting, want to voice specifically?
You said, are there specific characters or types of characters that people in general want to voice?
Yeah, like if someone were to get into voice acting, do you think that they would do it specifically because they want to voice certain kinds of characters because they think that they're cool?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And in fact, I think it's a generally a good idea for people getting into voice acting to focus on their strengths or on the things that they're passionate about first off. Just because you have to have the passion first of all for there to be quality. If you're not engaged with the work that you're doing, then if your heart's not in it, it's going to show through your voice as well. Um, but also because by coming in and focusing on your strengths first, they're able to work or create a foundation for themselves, create that initial body of work, and then either they can use the money that they've earned to expand their skill set through workshops, or they can say, okay, now that I have a firm handle on this section of the industry, I want to expand my skill set so this isn't the only kind of work that I can do. Um, so, when I first started VO, I was not good at all at deeper voices. I was not. Anytime I tried to do a deeper voice, I was manipulating my voice either physically, trying to make myself sound older, or I was straight up manipulating my voice in the recording program and pitching it down artificially because I was like, oh, this voice is too high pitched. Oh, this voice type, what I have is not going to work for the character. But over time, and as I've aged, I have learned how to access that range more authentically. And now, as an example, a recent example, there's the demo for Duck Detective that came out where I kind of do that detective noir voice that I do. And it is not me. It is a different pitch of my voice, but it's one that I'm more comfortable with. And it's, again, an expanding of that skill set. So, um, to go back to the original answer to the question, not surprised at all that people get into it because they're like, "Oh my god, I want to play that kind of character." And to them I say, if you're willing to put in the time and the effort and you understand what makes that character interesting, understand what makes them interesting in the context of their world and their situation and their environment, then go for it because that excitement, that eagerness, that passion is part of what makes these projects so enjoyable for others to watch. It's that human connection that not only pulls you in, but is gonna help you pull the audience in as well.
Yeah, that exact same thing happened to me when I was first starting. When I was putting together my demo reel, my first one back in the day, I thought, all right, cool. I want to voice like gruff, awesome soldiers or old wizards,
Mhm.
forgetting that I was, a 16-year-old boy, so that didn't really
Right.
work out. Um, I saw a funny meme years ago about voice acting where it was a cartoon guy saying, I'm a freelance voice actor. And he had like a Yeti microphone and herbal tea. And the herbal tea thing really stuck with me because I remember being told to drink certain kinds of tea and eat apples to keep your voice nice and crisp. And as a professional, what are certain things that you do to keep yourself not just healthy, but voice acting healthy?
Right. Well, preparation is key. Everyone brings up staying hydrated, but it's not just about drinking water when you are about to perform. You should be hydrating regularly because that water needs time to go through your body for it to rejuvenate cells, for it to hydrate, your whole self, not just your throat. Having I say this ironically, knowing that our healthcare system is a joke at times, if not all the time. But having access to a good ear, nose, and throat doctor that can, check out and make sure that your systems are working regularly. I remember when I had my first ever appointment with an ENT, I learned that bronchitis that I had had several years ago had actually given me an acute but chronic sinus infection that I had been dealing with for 2, 3 years at that point. That was just constantly putting small amounts of phlegm in the back of my throat and irritating the back of my throat, which was affecting my voice. Um, uh, Proper aftercare when it comes to doing vocally stressful sessions, involves, again, keeping hydrated, but also understanding when the best course of action is to just not talk at all. There are plenty of instances where I will come home from a very vocally intense session, and the best thing to do is, if not to go straight to sleep, to just not talk. And that means no humming, no whisper talking, no gentle talking, just not talking at all because uh talking in its very core explanation is your vocal flaps rubbing against each other. It's that friction. So if they are sore or calloused from being used over and over and over again, and you do anything that involves vibrating them again, you're not helping the situation. You're just making it worse. Um, but also, one of the more recent things that I learned is understanding what it is that you're doing to treat any roughness and if it's actually an effective solution. So, for example, a lot of people think that drinking tea is the, be all end all solution to a sore throat, when sometimes it's not about the throat or the tube that liquids go down, but the tubes that your air goes through when you're breathing it out of your lungs. There's a difference between drinking tea and using like a vocal mister or an aerosol that goes into the air passageways and not just, the passage leading to your stomach. Or what it is that you're consuming. As an example, a lot of people use stuff like peppermint to help clear their sinuses, or there is a popular tea brand that a lot of people use or swear by as a soother for the throat, not knowing that the ingredients in that tea are designed to numb the throat, not to soothe it. And so you think that you are soothing it from the wear and tear when actually what you're doing is tricking yourself into thinking that it feels better and putting yourself at greater risk of doing more damage to it because you think you're good to continue when really you should be resting.
Hmm. Yeah, the golden rule when it comes to voice acting, if it hurts, don't do it. Even if
Hmm.
it's just like one line, because you don't know how many times they're going to say, all right, take 37, go.
Right. And it's a funny number that you say or it's funny that you say that number because there was a line in my career that I had to do 37 takes of before the client was finally happy with it. So,
And as any singer will tell you, whispering is harder on your voice than talking normally.
mhm.
One of the coolest things about being an actor is that you become a part of a product that hopefully people are working hard on to be of high quality. It's not just like busy work or wait in the toilet until it's 5 p.m. kind of work. You
Right.
get to hear and say hopefully important inspirational things. It's like why buy a self-help book when you can be cast in a story where your character says a very inspirational motivational thing. So as a voice actor, how do you think your work and saying certain things as a character has made you a better person?
Made me a better person
Mm.
just from voicing characters?
By being parts of being a part of a story that's supposed to be grand and emotional and engage
Sure.
certain people.
Um, hmm. Well, on the real world side of it, I would say it feels nice to be able to help individuals bring their ideas to life. It feels nice to inspire artists and creators through my performance. I've had plenty of cases where folks are like, this thing that you said on stream or this performance that you gave, entertained me so much that I just had to draw something about it because I had this idea pop in my head. So that's always really fun. Um, in terms of, I guess the way that I view it would be having the experiences of those characters bleed back into me is I try to it can help me recognize things about myself that allowed me to portray those characters so effectively. Using Subaru Natsuki from ReZero as an example, it was how I realized a lot of the parallels that I had with him were that I felt indebted to people that have helped me out, that I often take on more than is necessary as an individual because I feel like I have to be the one responsible for making stuff happen, that it can be difficult for me to rely on others to fill in the gaps because I feel like it's my responsibility. So, and sometimes it's what characters say that I internalize. An example being Draken from Tokyo Revengers, a very, very, very popular quote of his that people often share and enjoy is when he says to Mikey, "You don't have to bow your head; just have a heart that cares for others." Which have always interpreted to mean you don't have to be subservient to others. You don't have to pretend to be something that you're not, but you do need to understand when it's not your turn in the spotlight, when it's time to focus on other people and lift them up and let them say their piece. And I think that's an important reminder that I've tried to internalize of, it is you are valid in having moments where you want to succeed or share your success and have it recognized, but be willing to recognize when it's not your turn anymore and you need to make sure that others are getting the chance to shine and celebrate and feel good about themselves as well. So that is where I would say, there's these characters have either really insightful quotes or really insightful mindsets that I also try to bring into my life where it makes me a more understanding, more empathetic, and more patient person in general.
Lovely, beautiful. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, when you have to voice characters like Noob Saibot or the Demon King from Demon Turf, or and any sort of big monster character, a fighting character, where your lines are literally things like "gar" and "here," how do you get into character to understand how those characters would say those noises?
For me, I don't literally physicalize it, but I get as close as possible to physicalizing it. Like if a character is being choked, I won't actually choke myself, but I will definitely put pressure around my neck so that I can get some of those noises out. If you part of being able to give different hit reacts if you're doing a fighting game is, if you do every react as if you're getting punched in the chest or every react as if you're getting punched in the stomach, yes, you may get realistic sounding reactions, but they're all going to sound like, oh, you were hit in this specific area. So you have to some people will remind themselves of life events, like what did it feel like when I got hit in the head by a dodgeball when I was younger, or what did it feel like when I slammed my shoulder into a door because I turned the wrong way. For some people, they may get to the point of almost replicating it and go, okay, how does my body naturally react when I fake hit myself there? Or how do I feel like I'm about to react if I were to actually hit myself there? Okay, what kind of noise would that make? That's where the exploration comes into play of, obviously if it's not safe to uh fully replicate it, then you have to be able to act it. You have to be able to convince yourself and the person listening that, oh, this actually happened to them, or that what they hear is within the realm of reason of what would happen if a person was struck in that way.
One thing that I've noticed change in the voice acting world is the movie voiceover voice, the Don LaFontaine voice, the
Mhm,
in a world kind of thing.
mhm,
And even with ads on the radio, it's never, well, not never, but a lot of the time, it's not someone talking as as a voiceover guy saying this
right.
is important. It's like two friends talking about insurance or some sort of important thing. It's always something a bit more casual. And do you think that there's going to be a resurgence or disappearance of certain styles of voice acting over the next several years?
Well, industry trends are always changing. I I believe the main reason why the Don LaFontaine trailer voice stopped is because the dude's dead. And has been dead for several years at this point. But he had worked so much that they still had projects coming out that he had narrated for like a good 2.5, 3 years after he had passed on. Like that is how prolific the guy's work was, how far in advance it was. Um, but you're correct in that industry trends are always changing. We think of the ads from the 90s where it often was that hip, cool arcade surfer dude. Like, you had the rad purple, white, and blue stripes that you had in the cups. Like everything was very new age, new tech sort of thing. And then a lot of commercials nowadays tend to lean more towards being casual and confident. I know that during the 2000s or during the 2010s, the really big trend in commercials, especially radio, was you and I are best friends and we have been for a while, and I'm telling you about this really cool thing. But nowadays, they've leaned kind of away from assuming that you are already in a friendship with this person and going more towards that angle of I am knowledgeable, I am confident, I am someone that you want to trust, even if you don't know me as a friend yet, because I'm gonna lead you to the correct choice to solve your problem, you know? A lot of earlier commercials were about trying to convince people to get the product, whereas I've noticed a big trend nowadays is uh, explaining to people who have a specific problem why this solution is the one that will work for them. And I know that sounds the same as saying I'm convincing you, but one is trying to convince people that they are interested in something that they otherwise would not have had any interest in. Another is telling people, "Oh, you're trying to plan a trip. Oh, you're trying to buy a dishwasher. Oh, you need to get this thing fixed. This is the solution that is going to be best for you." It's catering to specific audiences. Um, and so you will still see, differing levels of energy. A children's toy commercial is still going to have more energy than a life insurance policy commercial, which is going to have a different energy from a McDonald's food app commercial, you know? It's about catering the energy and giving off that visage of someone who's familiar with that genre, familiar with that experience, familiar with that problem, who is now helping you, the listener, to understand why it will probably work for you too and why it's a smart idea.
In you mentioned before Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, where you voiced the Great Deku Tree and Falco from Star Fox 64. And
Right. And that was to convince people to update their car's extended warranty.
mhm, what I'm wondering is the voices are fairly different. And I'm wondering, did you audition for both and then get both, or were the casting people w wanting actors to do multiple voices, knew that you could do both of them, and then picked you to do both of them?
So originally the Great Deku Tree was the only character that I had booked. I did by the time I came in to do the callbacks, I had figured out that the code name they used was referring to this character. I had a fair amount of confidence in it. But originally, to my understanding, they didn't know yet that Teba was going to need a voice, and Rivali had already been cast as somebody else, and I never found out who that someone was. And I was only cast as the Great Deku Tree. And then during the process of recording, for whatever reason, Rivali ended up. They were searching around for a potential replacement for Rivali's voice, so they asked if I wanted to do a sample for him, and that obviously worked out very well. And then, in the process of finishing up the Great Deku Tree and going through the recordings for Rivali, they said, "Oh, we have one additional character that also needs a voice. Um, are you capable of doing something that sounds distinctly different from both Rivali and the Great Deku Tree?" And once I saw the sample, I was like, "Oh, I already know what he sounds like in my head. This is going to sound different enough." So it was a gradual process of there was the one character that I did audition for as part of my sides, and I did book them. And then the second one came in as an unexpected opportunity that I was able to capitalize on. And then the third one, this happens actually pretty commonly where they will check around and say, "Okay, are there any characters we missed? Are there any, is it possible for us to have an existing actor fill in as a different one because we're paying for their time in the studio, not for the number of characters that they're voicing?" And so they saw that one and said, "Okay, well, it's the same type of character. It's also a Rito. It's from this species. Are you able to do something that sounds different? You can. Great. That works fine for us. We like what we're hearing. Let's have you take care of that one as well." That's where you get into the efficiency aspect of running a studio.
So when you see the pictures of characters that you're doing the voices for, like Rivali, a big bird guy, how do you decide what the character should sound like just from the picture?
It can be the physicality, it can be how their age, it can be another physical descriptor, and like, okay, how might that physical descriptor affect my vocals as well? It can just be our personal interpretation of in my head, what does a character like that sound like? That's a big part of what we as actors bring to the table in terms of individuality. And then we will present our ideas to the director, and if the director or the client have a different idea that they want to try out, whether it's for poops and giggles or if it's because what we have is close, but they want to see what it sounds like if we add a little bit of a tweak to it. Then it becomes a collaborative process where we're making small changes to that foundation or just going in a completely different direction until we have something that sticks as a foundation, and then making those tweaks until we arrive at a spot where the actor's like, yep, this is something that I can identify with. I can see why these choices would be made. And where the director goes, this matches with the energy or with the intent that we're going with this character with this project. And then when they meet in the middle in that way, then they move forward with the performance. Or if it's just not working out, either because the actor isn't able to bring that idea to life or because the director feels like they aren't hitting what they're looking for, then they might recast the character. So
In 2022, you responded to the Bayonetta controversy, where Helena Taylor refused to take the role because she thought that the pay that she was getting was not acceptable. It reminds me of David Eddings, who was the voice of Claptrap from the Borderlands
mhm.
games until Borderlands 3 came out, or before it came out, where he I think again there was some money problems, and he wasn't the voice of Claptrap anymore. For those who don't know, what was going on with Bayonetta and Helena Taylor and money?
Sorry, one more time what the question was?
What was going on with Bayonetta and Helena Taylor not doing the voice?
I mean, I don't have the insider info on that. I only had what I read from people postulating online, or what we thought was the truth, or what one side said, or what another side said. I mean, there were all kinds of gossip pieces going through the rumor mill. There were claims that Helena was already planning on backing out of voiceover and wanted to get a fat check before leaving. I don't know how true that is. There were rumors that they had been underpaid versus the amount of time that they spent in the studio. I don't know how true that is. Um, there were theories that their agent was trying to ask for more money because they had given such an iconic performance. Again, I don't know how true that rumor is. Um, so there's a lot of factors that we as general consumers are not privy to and don't have access to. So we can only theorize what the answer might be. Of course, I would hope that any video game voice actor, any voice actor in general, is being fairly compensated for their time. I certainly feel like there's good incentive or reason for that compensation to be in line with how profitable the industry has become. I do get that voice actors are just a single gear in a giant machine that is helping create this entire universe. Um, but what I mean when I say that is, voice actors have a union, and a lot of animators don't. A lot of musicians don't. And so when we get pushback on things like, well, why are you guys pushing for better pay, better working conditions when these animators are dealing with so much less? Our response is typically they shouldn't be. We hope they unionize. We hope they are able to fight for better conditions. We are only in charge or only have control over the terms that we are paid with. So that opens up a whole can of worms about business ethics and potential exploitation and the exponential demands of capitalism and stuff like that. So I don't purport to know the actual story behind why Claptrap or why Bayonetta um, were either being recast or being paid a different amount, but at the end of the day, it's really just it's a careful balance between understanding our worth in terms of being able to fight for fair working conditions and fair pay, but also understanding our worth in the sense of yes, you are the voice of a character, but that doesn't mean you are the voice of the character. Part of how I keep myself humble in my career is I understand that every role that I've done could have been played by any number of people. Those auditions went out to probably at bare minimum 15, 20 other people, probably ideally between 50 to 100, potentially up to 500 or even 1,000. So it is not just a job that I booked, it is a job that someone else would have enjoyed having that they did not get. And so, not to be a doom poster of saying you are easily replaceable, but there are plenty of people who are competent at their job and talented enough to be able to give an equally riveting performance. So there's a limit to how much you can say I'm the head honcho around here and I deserve higher pay because yes, you deserve to be fairly compensated, but also you're not the only person that can do what you do.
I actually had to explain this to a friend recently, where voice actors don't own the voice of the characters that they're doing. It's like we see that with The Simpsons, where main main actors for the main characters can just
Mhm.
drop out for whatever reason, and someone can just jump in and just do an impression of that voice, and it's fine. It works out. They just slot right in.
Right.
And now we come to the amazing Digital Circus, that little online project. How was the audition and recording for that any different to the games and the shows that you've done before?
Not really any different. I mean, the audition process was pretty much the same where we got character sides for the characters that were open for auditions, and then we followed the instructions and sent the auditions in by the established deadline. The recording may be different from video games. I mean, it's different from video games the same way that animation in general is different from video games. Video games, at least in many cases, the recording will be done independently, where each person has their own associated time slot. Whereas with animation, we will typically record before the animators work on stuff to give them something to work off of. Also, animation tends to more consistently involve multiple members of the cast recording simultaneously so they can play off of each other. That is a thing that we have potentially done with Digital Circus. And I would not be surprised if we did that with future episodes as well, now that they've announced the season. Um, I forget whether they announced a season or if they announced a couple extra episodes. So don't take my word as law on that. Uh, and where yeah, so it's not so much, oh, Digital Circus is different from video games, so much as animation in general is different from video games, and because Digital Circus is original animation, it falls into that genre naturally.
So, of course, you voice Kinga, who's a chess piece head with a robe, and that's sort of kind of it. When you are told about this character or see pictures, how do you decide what a chess piece head with a robe should sound like?
It's less about the visual and more about the physical descriptions and about his personality. We can try and attribute stuff to, oh, it's a chess piece, and a chess piece would act this way, but um we can see that he wears royal attire, and I ask, okay, is this just a thing that he likes to put on, or is he actually considered a king? Does it matter? Like, is does it have relevance to the story? Okay, what's his personality like? Does he have anxiety? Is he a little paranoid? Is he easily frightened by things? Is he optimistic? Is he a little cuckoo? Like, is he someone who's often happy because they're oblivious to the world around them? What we don't understand, we ask questions about so that we can get a better understanding of the character, and then we use the information that we are given to concoct our interpretive voice for that character, see how it fits with the creator's wishes, and then, as I mentioned earlier, go into that collaborative process of, ooh, I like what you did there. This works for this reason. Let's try making this adjustment, or let's see, let's have something a little closer to this on this line. Or they may provide additional context when they say, so in this scene or in this scenario, or this is their relationship to a given character, whatever it is that I might not already be privy to, because I'm the actor coming in to bring an existing product to life, whereas the creator or the client has had way more time with that project and has a much deeper understanding of these characters, their arcs, and their interactions.
When you're recording voiceover roles and you have to go into the studio to do it, with or without a director, how often do these studios change? Like how often do you have to go to different locations for different jobs?
Studios themselves are pretty consistent. Like, I can't think of any cases where a studio is going to send you to a different recording location if you're working for them. So if I'm doing work for Bang Zoom, or I'm doing work for Dubbing Brothers, or I'm doing work for Sony, they have a specific office or a specific recording studio space that I'm going to be heading to, which they may have multiple recording booths, but I'm talking about the general building that I'm heading to. Um, as an actor, I want to have as many shots to take as possible. So I will often, look for different workshops that I can take or different clients that I can try and get in touch with so that I have more potential studios I could be doing work with. But the studios themselves are not going to change very much in terms of where they choose to do their individual recordings.
Right. Well, before I ask my last question, I must ask the second last question, which is where do people go to keep up to date with all of your voice acting stuff?
Where can people keep in touch with me?
Yes, that is me.
Um, Twitter is the big one right now under VA Sonic Mega. I recently heard that Blue Sky finally went public, so I really need to be more active about posting on Blue Sky as well, which is just Sonic Mega without the VA in the front. I do technically have an Instagram, but it's pretty much dead in the water. I have no interest in using it. I'm not about that song and dance. But I also invite people to check out my streams, which is twitch.tv/Sonic Mega. Um, just because we have a very fun community. I have a lot of insightful things to say about the games that I'm playing, or really cool things to showcase. And it's also just my way of kind of breaking down the barrier between the professional and the consumer side of the industry, and exploring the things that I enjoy in a relaxed atmosphere. So Twitch, Blue Sky, Twitter, those are the main three right now. I don't foresee them changing anytime soon, but at least I'm pretty consistent with them.
All right. And now we come to the last question, which is the last question that I always ask as the last question on this thing, which is why are stories important?
Because they remind us of our own world, and they give us places to connect to, and they give us people to root for, and they give us things to see accomplished. Um, Stories can reframe something that we weren't able to explain. They can bring closure to us by having us witness something that we personally experienced in a different light. Um, and sometimes they're just fun. The human mind loves to imagine. The human mind loves to concoct. It loves to come up with scenarios. That's why daydreaming is a thing that so many people talk about. So, whether we understand it or not, stories are how we make sense of the world around us and retain information for the future. And I say that's why they're important.
All right. Sean Chiplock, thank you so much for coming on to One Story Building.
Thank you for having me.